You're listening to an Iraq Currency Watch podcast. Here's Marcus, Curtis, and Sam I Am.
Welcome to another Iraq Currency Watch podcast. In our last podcast, we talked about Dinar Corp. When Sam and I sat down to discuss Dinar Corp, that conversation lasted an hour and 30 minutes. And that was way too long to put in a podcast. We want our podcast to be about half hour, 45 minutes. We definitely don't want to go into an hour. So what we've done is we've cut this thing in half, and the first part basically covers Dinar Corp, and we have an exercise in the second part that we would like you to follow along with. So if you're at your computer and you have access to the internet and you can open up a browser, there's a simple little exercise that you can follow along with. Now you're going to need Microsoft Office, or you're going to need Open Office or a program like that, because we're going to access Excel. And what we're going to do is we're going to download documents from the internet, and we're going to show you the currency supplies that Iraq has outside of its banks. But before we get into all of that, we're going to pick up the conversation where we left off from the last podcast. And all the notes from the last podcast are going to transfer over to this podcast. So you can go down and click on the same links. These two podcasts are more or less a set that hook together. So without further ado, we're going to pick it up. And here I am talking with Sam.
Okay, here's the thing, Marcus. When the BH Group was indicted back in 2012, I believe it was, people in the Dinar community were saying, well, it was all about the hedge fund and the money laundering.
Exactly.
But no, you read that indictment and you will see that they misrepresented the currency reform plan as a revaluation when in fact it's a redenomination.
Right.
Okay. They addressed the dinar scam, the RV scam in that indictment.
Right.
Okay. Then in the sterling indictment, it says right there that these guys knew that there was not going to be any RV. Everybody was saying, oh, it wasn't about the RV. It was just about blah, blah, blah. No, all three of these cases, BH Group, Sterling, and Dinar Corp, they've all of those indictments have addressed the fact that the dinar RV is a scam.
Is a scam. Right. And we're out there saying it's a scam, and we're getting heat from people for it. But, you know, it is a scam. The government officials say it is a scam. These court records say it is a scam. And the other thing that came from the Sterling indictment, which was something we said all along, was that these gurus were on the payroll. How much was Terry K getting for lying about the dinar?
Let's see. We figured it was $50,000 a year, at least.
Yeah, more than that. And then he had other ways of making money. So these guys,
I mean, just the compensation from Sterling was $50,000 a year.
Right.
He also sold stuff on his site, and he also got money. I mean, he also had Dinar Inc.
Yeah.
He had Robert Hoffman from Dinar Inc. on his broadcasts. So I'm sure he was getting compensated by Dinar Inc. as well.
Right.
So Terry K was making, some pretty serious money there.
Yeah.
While while he was a free man.
Right. Right. Well, while he was a free man, but he's a Christian, brother. He would never defraud the flock.
Well, don't get me started on that.
Fleecing the sheep, see?
Yeah, but the same people who were talking about the BH Group, it wasn't about the dinar. Sterling, it's not about the dinar. Those same people now, they're saying that with the Dinar Corp case, it was about the reserve program.
Right.
Well, yeah, the reserve program was addressed, but also in this case, it called it a scam. And you just read it.
You just read it, yeah. I just read it, yeah. And it's important to note, they'll highlight certain things as if that's the only reason why the government went after them. And I've brought this up with you once before, Sam. Al Capone did a lot of bad things. He was a criminal. He had a criminal empire. and the government shut him down. How did they do that? They went in and prosecuted him for tax evasion. Out of all the bad things he's done, he was prosecuted for tax evasion. Now, would it be fair to say, oh, the government went after Al Capone because he didn't pay his taxes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that the only reason the government went after Al Capone was because he didn't pay his taxes?
No.
No, exactly.
Wasn't the only reason.
Exactly.
The main reason they went after him was because of all the bootlegging and what else did he? I guess he killed people.
There's all kinds of stuff.
And I don't know if he robbed banks or not. I'm sorry, I'm not real up on my Al Capone history.
The Valentine Massacre was a Al Capone thing. But Valentine's Day Massacre or something like that. But see, the point is this. The government's not going after these guys based on one offense. They're going after him to shut him down. And with Al Capone's story, he got more time for tax evasion than for bootlegging. That's why they prosecuted him for tax evasion.
Well, I have to suspect that O.J. Simpson got extra time not because of the crime that he was convicted of. But I've always believed that they gave him a longer sentence because they were convinced that he was a murderer.
Right.
You know, I can't prove that they did that, but it was kind of a, excessive sentence for the crime. But then you have to consider the person that was being sentenced.
Right.
But you can't say that doesn't happen in our criminal justice system, whether it's fair or not. I do think that they went after Dinar Corp for the reserve program primarily because that was easiest to prove.
Wire fraud. That carries one of that. He was convicted of wire fraud, according to the deal, and that carries a heavy sentence. I mean, he's looking at 20 years here.
Well, I think with the BH group, they went after them on the hedge fund. And the money laundering parts, because when you start talking about currency valuation and revaluation and redenomination, and you've got a jury sitting there, you see how hard it is to explain this to people in the Dinar community. Try explaining that to a jury of people who have absolutely no background in currency speculation, don't know anything about this. I think that this is what prosecutors do: is they go after the best, most provable counts,
right?
And they focus on those, not because the other thing isn't true, but because it's not as easy to get a conviction on with a jury that's going to sit there and listen to a lot of information on economics.
Right, and when you look at Sterling Currency Group, what were they prosecuted on? Now, in the indictment, when you read through it, you'll see that they knew through emails that the dinar wasn't going to revalue, but they were marketing it through their network of gurus and paying them as though it was. And what did they go after them for? Wire fraud. Even though it's a little bit different than what Sterling did, they're calling it wire fraud.
Right.
Because wire fraud carries a heavy sentence with it. They're shutting these guys down by any means possible. And just to sit there and say, well, they didn't have enough dinar to cover their reserves, and that's why that's BS. Absolute BS. Don't buy into that at all. That's going to be what you're going to hear from all the gurus, but that's BS.
Yeah. It's time for people just to accept the fact that this thing was a scam. It was never going to happen. It was always based on lies and misinformation, misrepresentations of how currency valuations happen, and misrepresentation of what the CBI was saying. And you and I started informing people about this about 3 years ago. Well, actually 4 years ago for me.
Right, misrepresentations on what revalues actually are.
Right,
misrepresentations and changing history, like the Kuwaiti revalue and the Germany revalue, which never really happened. It was not a real event. Remember that video that was out that said Japan's currency revalued when it actually floated?
Yeah.
And
floating currencies don't revalue.
No, but that's the thing they do. They take things and make it. They tie in all these junk
Well, they
economics.
just got to have this idea that if the value changes, it was a revalue.
Yeah.
No, that's
That's not how it works.
that revaluation has nothing to do with floating currencies going up and down
Right.
as as the market changes. That's depreciation and appreciation. But
Right.
revaluation is when the central bank says, "Okay, we're going to raise the value,"
Right.
and they never raise the value by 100%, 1,000%, 100,000%. That doesn't happen.
Right. And
It didn't happen with Kuwait. Didn't happen with Germany.
And it was funny. I was seeing a post the other day, and somebody was saying that that all these other guys are tied into Iraq's revalue of their currency, because if Iraq could revalue their currency it would have happened by now. And I thought to myself, bingo! If Iraq could revalue their currency, it would have happened by now. Well, we know through our study of economics that only central banks revalue their currency. They're the only ones that have the shot in that. They can hyperinflate it and by revaluing it and totally destroy it. Absolutely true. But only central banks, only Iraq central bank is responsible for the revalue of the dinar.
But here's the deal. These people who say, why haven't they revalued yet? What's holding up the revalue? They have revalued. This is something you don't hear from the gurus, but Iraq has revalued.
Yeah, 4 pips.
Several times. From 2006 to 2009, they were bumping it up about 1% a month for 26 months.
Yeah, and that's what caused the speculation to get out of control, by the way.
Right. People saw the value was going up, and they were thinking, whoopee, it's about to take off. But no, they were doing the crawling peg thing because they were trying to bring the rate of inflation down. But those were revaluations. Every time they raised the value from 2006 to 2009, that's a revaluation.
Well, I got a theory on that.
People might think, well, big deal. It only went up 25%.
Well, that's what a revalue is.
Yeah, exactly. And by revaluation standards, that's very high.
Yeah, currencies don't revalue 1,000% or 100%.
No, 25% is a big revaluation. That was a big deal.
It was a big
deal. But people have been so misinformed about how revaluations work that they think that's just a puny little revaluation. No.
Right.
No, it's a big revaluation. You just don't understand how revaluations work if you think it's going to go up 100,000%.
Well, you raise an interesting point, because I believe that when it did revalue during that point up till 2009, I think that they saw all these American dollars coming in as more and more people began to speculate on their currency. We've had this conversation before. When their currency leaves their country, it's exchanged for other currency coming into their country. They don't just take their currency and send it out there without getting anything in return. It's exchanged for U.S. dollars. And those U.S. dollars are brought into Iraq as the dinar leaves Iraq. And I think that when they up the value of the currency in that little crawling peg, I think that they were surprised at how much currency was leaving their country. As a matter of fact, I can prove that right now. You want to do an experiment with me?
How are you going to prove that?
All right. If you're listening to this at home and you're following along at home, if you have a computer, you can do the same thing. We're just going to go and do a simple experiment. Open up the browser of your choice. It doesn't matter what it is. Any browser will work. And let me get over here where I can get to my browser buttons. And in the search engine, just type CBI. And let's see what happens. Oh, well, just type CBI dinar.
What did you come up with? Clarence Bikes International?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we have the Central Bank of Iraq. It says www.cbi.iq. Go ahead and click on that link. We're looking for a specific document, and this is going to enlighten. Let's see if I can find it here. Maybe it's in financial statements. Is it in financial statements? No, it's not there. Let's see. You know what document I'm looking for? Do you know where it is?
I know what the document is. I don't know how to get there.
Okay.
Well, hang on a second. Let me see what-
Publications. I think it's in publications. Is it in publications?
Key financial statements?
Yeah.
No, let's see. You have to
Oh,
get
statistics. It's in-
Statistics will take you to key financial statements.
Okay. Now you're looking for the key financial statements document. And the document is called Key Financial Indicators. Is that what it is? I think it is. Okay. Key financial indicators.
Indicators, right.
Right.
Yeah, that's in the white section in the middle.
Now all you have to do is click on that and download it. Now you're going to need, for this to work, you're going to need Microsoft Office. If you don't have Microsoft Office, you can go download Open Office for free. Okay, so what we're going to do is download this document now and open it with either Open Office or Microsoft Office. And it's an Excel document. Did you do that?
I'm opening it.
Okay, yeah. All you have to do is click on the key financial indicators. Okay?
My computer's kind of slow, but it's opening now.
Okay. Once that document is open, this is all the financial statements for Iraq as far as their dinar supply. And if you look at the top of the document, we're looking at the year June 29th, 2016 is the last time this was updated. Talks about inflation and the index for inflation. And there's all these lines going all the way down. So what you have to do is you have to scroll down. And we're going to go to line, let's see. Line 78. Line 78. It says A, currency outside of banks. Do you see that?
178. Yeah.
Currency outside of banks. Okay. Now, this is in billions. Okay. So the millions and the thousands are omitted. This is just in billions. So currency outside of banks. Go to your right and you'll see. For January of 2016, what's it say?
35,178. So that's 35,000 billion.
Yeah, 35 trillion 178 dinar.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And for February, how much is there?
35,900 billion.
Good. For March, what do you see?
37,518 billion.
Right. Let's see. For April, and I'm going to say this a little bit different, just to put some little bit flair on this. 38 trillion
38 trillion
482 billion. Okay. For May, 39 trillion 718 billion.
Wait a minute, Marcus. I thought they were reducing the money supply.
No, the money supply is going up. But look at this. 39 trillion 718 billion dinar is outside the banking system. Okay? That's amazing, right? Now, we got this information from the Central Bank of Iraq. Now, if you look at the bottom of this Excel document, you'll see a little slide thing. It's a horizontal slide thing, and it allows you to slide around. And you can slide back. If you move that slider, you can go back in years. This is 2016. We can go back to 2015. As a matter of fact, we can go all the way back to 2004. Okay? Mm-hmm. Do you see the slider?
Yeah.
And if you're following along, it's just at home. You're listening to this podcast. You're following along. Just go down to the bottom of your screen to the far right above your time clock and your date thing, and you'll see a little slider there if you're on a Windows PC. And we're going to slide this over. And there's the year 2015. We're going to keep going. There's the year 2014, 2013, 2012, 2011. And you see now they narrowed down. They don't show you months. When you get into the year 2014, it just shows you the year totals. It doesn't show you the month totals. And so what we're going to do is go back to 2010. Okay? Mm-hmm. 2010, line 78 says what? Let's see, 2010. Let's go back to currency outside of banks in the year 2010 of December is?
24 trillion, 342 billion.
Okay, let's slide over a little bit more. Let's go back one more year. 2009. 2009 is when I got into the Iraq currencies, when I invested at 23 trillion, 494 billion.
No, that's the bank reserves.
I'm sorry, bank reserves.
Currency outside of banks in 2009 was 21 trillion, 776 billion.
21 trillion, 776 billion. Okay. Now, go to 2014. What do you see?
36 trillion and 72 billion.
So, and they had 21 trillion. We're going to use round numbers here. They had 21 trillion outside of banks in 2009. And just 4 years later, or 5 years later, in 2014, they had 36 trillion. That means in a period of 5 years, they released $15 trillion to their money supply. That's amazing, isn't it? Because think about this. What happens? Their money supply is 21 trillion in 2009. 75% of that money supply was introduced again over the period of 5 years. That's a lot of currency. What happens when you add that much currency to the money supply?
Well, either your value goes down or your reserves go up.
Okay, so there's or reserves go up. But what else happens? What's the common indicator when you add that much money to this? I'll tell you what happens. The same thing that happened to them in the 90s.
Okay, I know what you're getting at.
Hyperinflation.
Yeah.
Not just inflation, hyperinflation. You have massive inflation when you introduce that much currency to the money supply. Yet, if you look at the inflation numbers in those years, they were in the single digits. If you look at the value of the currency in those years, it didn't really change that much. But that should have brought the value of the currency down low.
Yeah, the value wasn't hardly changing. I mean, after 2009,
right.
They only made one adjustment between 2009 and 2014.
And that was 4 pips.
It went from 1170 to 1166.
Right.
Big whoop. They bumped it up a third of 1%.
Exactly. So in 5 years, they release 15 trillion dinar into the currency supply, and nothing happens to the value of the currency or to hyperinflation or inflation at all. I smell a rat.
Yeah.
Something is afoot here. Something does not feel right.
So are you suggesting that most of that money that they printed was going outside of the country?
Ding, 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 ding. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Yes, I'm suggesting that. The reason why hyperinflation didn't come into Iraq, and the reason why they didn't experience any devaluation in the currency, or devaluation in the currency. The reason why none of that happened was because this currency was being exported. As the dinar was leaving, the U.S. dollars were coming in. And this dinar went all over the globe. Now, this is just back to 2009. We can go all the way back and do the figures. In 2004 is when people started investing in the currency. When it started to move up in little segments, little revalues, when it started to move up, you can see that more currency was being exported from the country. Now, according to their currency laws in Section 32, they have to replace dinar that is damaged or missing because they need enough for their currency supply. You do not dump 15 trillion of your currency unit into your nation without experiencing hyperinflation. It is just not possible. This dinar was leaving the country. That's the only explanation. The only explanation. They were not replacing damaged currency. They were replacing currency that was leaving.
Well, yeah, if you're replacing damaged currency, that doesn't come up in these figures.
No.
We do that all the time. We have what is the average lifespan of a dollar bill? 18 months?
Right.
something like that. But we replace currency all the time, but that doesn't come up in the money supply figures. That's just, replacing worn out dollars with new dollars through printing, but you're not adding into the money supply when you do that.
Exactly right. So that's what's going on here. They are exporting their currency and they're getting U.S. dollars, and that money goes straight to the reserves. Now, it's important to note that the reserves are not totally funded by the export of dinar. We are not saying that. We are not saying that all of their reserves come from dinar. Because the reserves come from other means. But so that money was going into the reserves, and that's why the reserves got abnormally higher than they did. I mean, I've looked at budgets and crunched numbers back when I was into this thing. Let's go back a few years. Let's go back. Let's see. We are 2007, 2006, 2005. 2004 is when the currency began to leave the country. Line 78. Let's look at line 78 again. Outside of banks for December of 2004 was $7,163
billion. Yeah.
Right. So from 2004 to 2014, that's just 10 years, we got 36 trillion dinar.
Yeah.
So 30 trillion dinar was dumped on their currency, on their money supply in 10 years, and there's no hyperinflation. And right now, the total outside of banks is 39 trillion, and that's not had an effect on inflation in the country at all. This currency is not in Iraq, because if it was in Iraq, they would feel the consequences of this currency being in Iraq. Mm-hmm. This is outside the country. Now, I've made this statement, and people really have criticized me for this, but it's the truth. I believe, in my numbers, that there are about 30 trillion dinar outside of the border of Iraq, and it was sold all over the world. This currency did not just go to America. It went to all the countries all over the globe. And there's so many different nations that sell dinar, and they have their own gurus and they have their own dealers set up. I'm beginning to smell a rat here. I don't think this stops with the dealers. I think this is something that's interesting. And what the export of the currency, as this currency leaves, is bringing in U.S. dollars. Mm-hmm. And we know that Iraq is a dual currency nation. They have the dollar and the dinar. And the dollar is king, not the dinar. In fact, if you look at the redenomination program that Shabibi was looking at, he wanted the dinar to compete with the dollar because he wanted more people to use the dinar over the dollar. That was the purpose for the redenomination to begin with. Otherwise, you would keep your currency value low because of export. But it was within his nation. He wanted to redenominate the currency so people would depend less on the U.S. dollar and more on the dinar. There were countless articles that stated this. And so they exported the dinar over all this time. And over the course of 10 years, 30 trillion dinar left that country and was sold to people around the world. Now, this is not governments. Governments are not buying this currency. These are private people. Private investors.
Now, there are some governments that hold dinar.
Yeah, well, they have to for facilitating various things like.
But it was right there in the Department of Justice document in the indictment of the BH Group. It said the Treasury Department stated we only hold enough dinar to handle daily transactions.
That's right.
They didn't hold trillions of dinar. Mm-hmm. At the U.S. Treasury, awaiting the revaluation so they could pay off the national debt or any of that nonsense that the gurus were saying.
Right.
They've only got, I don't know, maybe 50, 100 billion dinar sitting around that they need for whatever transactions. And they were probably doing that back when banks were handling the dinar, and the banks aren't handling it anymore.
Right. They were doing it back when you had all of these construction companies and people traveling overseas. They were trading in for dinar. They have dinar over there,
Right. And then, of course, the surrounding nations, they'll have dinar because they do business with Iraq. Mm-hmm. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, right. Kuwait. But
we should back up a little bit here. They don't have dinar so they can do business with Iraq, or so they can buy Iraq's goods. They have dinar so that people going into these countries can exchange currency for dinar. So they have dinar when they go into Iraq.
Right. Not the government doing business,
right.
but the people from the country.
Right. Currency exchange. Right. This is what this is.
Right. Yeah. But, if you're talking about like Peru or Japan. Japan probably doesn't do a lot of business with Iraq. So just the United States, of course, we have people going all over the world for contractors and so forth.
Okay.
I shouldn't say that. Maybe the Japanese do, but primarily it's the U.S. and the surrounding nations around Iraq. We had a lot invested in Iraq because we're the ones that went over there and blew their country to smithereens.
Right. But I'll tell you, when we look at the stats from Iraq Currency Watch, who visits our site? We have Australia, we have Canada, we have New Zealand, we have Malaysia is big. Malaysia, comes to our site and gets information from our site. And our site is not translated, so people have to have our site translated. And people get information from our site from all over the world, and we see these people coming in. So if Iraq if the dinar is exclusive to America, why are all these other sites coming to Iraq Currency Watch to get their information? Okay, so let's finish our experiment here. What we're going to do is open up a tab in our browser. So go back to your browser, and you'll see where you can open up another tab. You can keep the central bank there open up another tab. And in the Google search engine, type America's M2 money supply. Okay, lots of links come up. And let's see, here's Trading Economics. This is, by the way, a great site. So let's see what America's M2 money supply is right now. Oh, $12,807. I'm sorry, $12,807 is the current M2 money supply. And just the money outside of Iraq's bank, I'm not talking about their M0 money supply or M1. I'm just talking about the money outside of their bank is $39 trillion. And our M2 American dollars is $12 trillion. There's not even enough U.S. currency to support a revaluation. There's just no way that can happen. So you see, the numbers don't add up. Things don't make sense.
Right. And as John Jacobson pointed out to me when I brought up the actual numbers, what would happen if, let's just say, $1. Let's just say they revalued to $1, and Americans holding dinar went to cash in. You have to think about this now. Let's just say, off the top of my head, let's just say 1 million Americans have 1,000, or 1 million Americans have 1 million dinar each. Okay, 1 million times 1 million, what does that come to? $1 trillion?
My brain is fried right now. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, well, 1,000 million is a billion, and so 1 million would be $1 trillion. Okay, so you got $1 trillion dinars sitting in the hands of dinar speculators in the United States. They revalue to $1. So all of a sudden, we all go in to cash in, and we get credited $1 trillion. Okay, now you're not going to carry $1 trillion out of the bank, but people are going to be taking cash out.
Right, but also that's probably, if we're credited, that's probably going to be newly money, or could be money made on the spot, or you're dumping $1 trillion into the U.S. economy. We should back up and point out that 2/3 of our currency is exported overseas, because everybody uses our currency. Every nation uses our currency around the world. And there's way more currency outside our borders than what's inside of our borders. So 2/3 of the currency. So that if you're looking at this M2 money supply that says 12 trillion, 2/3 of that is outside the borders of the United States right now. It's sitting in reserves. It's being used to purchase oil. Countries are using it to exchange, like Ecuador. Zimbabwe uses the dollar exclusively. So that money. So you're actually dealing with American money supply. What's in America of about a fraction of that. Now, this is not fractional reserve banking where some portions of it is expanded. We're talking about the core money supply here. Okay, so that's 12 trillion and 2/3 is exported overseas. Okay, that's amazing. You're going to dump $1 trillion in the U.S. economy. What do you think is going to happen to the price of goods and services when you do that? It's going to go up. Do you remember what happened in the gold rush in San Francisco when people were paying $10 for a dozen of eggs because they discovered gold in San Francisco? Mm-hmm. Whenever you dump currency into the currency supply, not only does it rob the value of the currency that's already in circulation, you get hyperinflation.
Yep.
When you dump a massive amount of currency into the currency supply, you are going to get hyperinflation. How come Iraq has not had hyperinflation between 2004 and 2014 when 30 trillion dinar entered their currency supply? Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Because they weren't putting it into the local economy.
That's right. It was being exported.
Yeah. Now, what happens if all that money all of a sudden comes back to Iraq?
Hyperinflation.
Yeah.
So you think Iraq's going to want to bring that currency back? I got another question for you. What happens if Iraq redenominates and that 30 trillion that's outside of their borders is no longer invalid? And all the U.S. dollars, well, of course, they don't have U.S. dollars for it anymore because a lot of their reserves is being spent. But what happens if they redenominate the currency? And
if they redenominate the currency and people here find somebody who can take the dinar back to Iraq and exchange it for the new dinar or whatever,
right?
They're still going to be on the hook for that money. They don't want that money exchanged. They don't want their dinar exchanged for U.S. dollars or for the new dinar.
Right. Exactly.
They want that money to just sit here and rot.
Right. And if you have no way to exchange it, and the exchanging period expires, that currency is no longer valid. Then what are you going to do?
Yeah, wallpaper your bathroom with it. But here's the deal. It used to be, when you and I got into this thing in 2010, you could buy dinar at banks, all kinds of currency exchange places at airports or whatever. Right. Okay, the banks don't handle it anymore.
No, they don't.
Okay, I don't know that currency exchange places are handling the dinar.
Three dealers have been shut down.
Right, the dealers are being shut down. It's just a matter of time until the only place to liquidate your dinar is on eBay.
How are you going to get it back to Iraq to exchange it?
Yeah.
What if they close the borders like they did in 2000?
Yeah, you're not going to be able to
93 when
if they redenominate, you're not going to be able to sell on eBay.
Yeah,
because who wants to buy a currency that's going to be demonetized within 6 months?
Right.
I don't know how long the window is.
Right.
But yeah, you're at this point, you're looking at basically, you got to get on a plane and fly over there and try to find somebody to exchange it.
And I can tell you that if you get on a plane and fly over there and you walk through TSA, you cannot have currency greater in value of 10,000 US dollars. If you walk through TSA and going to a foreign country and you have over $10,000 on your person or currency that's valued over $10,000 on your person, they confiscate it. I know this.
So you have to have less than $10,000 worth of dinar, which would be less than 10 million dinar.
Well, if it's revalued.
Well, it's not going to revalue. So we're talking about an event of a redenomination.
Right, but either scenario, you're sunk.
9 million dinar on a plane and fly over there, but then you got to pay for a hotel.
Right,
you got to pay for a taxi.
Right.
You can't go into Iraq probably because they're not going to allow you into the country.
How much does an airline ticket cost?
Yeah,
who are you going to fly on?
I haven't priced tickets to Iraq lately. But let's just say you fly over to Dubai. Okay, how much is a hotel in Dubai?
Right.
Okay, and you're gonna have to try and find somebody in Dubai to exchange your IQD into the new dinar or into U.S. dollars. Well, they're going to charge you a hefty markup.
Yeah, sure they are. Yeah. And
by the time you get back here, you might come away with $500.
Yeah. 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 And that's if you have your passports in line. If you don't have a passport, you're not leaving the country.
But this is why people have said right from the get-go. John Jagerson did a couple of videos back in 2009 where he said, what are you going to do with those dinars if they redenominate?
Right.
What do you think you're going to do with them? You can't spend them on anything. You can't exchange, I mean, at the time you could still exchange them at the banks, but boy, in the event of a redenomination, you're not going to be able to.
Exactly.
Liquidity has always been the issue here.
Yes.
And people didn't want to accept the fact, well, they're not talking about a redenomination. They're not going to lop. There's no way they're going to lop.
Right.
Yeah, they're describing a lop. Now, I don't know if they'll ever get around to doing it or not, but make no mistake about it. The currency reform plan that should be put out there is a redenomination.
Exactly.
It's not a revaluation. People who have told you it is, they're lying to you.
They're lying to you, and they're being paid to do so. So, and now if you're at home listening to this podcast and you followed along in this experiment, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for following along. Thank you for seeing the numbers, and you saw all the same numbers that we put out there. Now, if you have not followed along in this experiment, I would say wait until you have a computer that you're in front of, call up the podcast again, and go to the part about this experiment and follow along. See if any gurus can answer the questions we put out to you. This is why the currency is a scam, and I need to drive this point home because I get this all the time. People tell me the dinar is not a scam, and they're right. The dinar is not a scam. The currency is not the scam. Marketing the dinar as a get-rich-quick scheme where you're going to be a millionaire overnight and then selling you the dinar based on that premise is the scam, not the dinar itself.
Yeah, it's just like selling beans in the store.
Right.
There's nothing illegal about selling beans, but if you charge an excessive markup and tell everybody they're magic beans,
you're raw beanstalk.
Then it's a scam.
Then that's the scam. Yeah, exactly. And that's basically what the dinar is. It's a scam, not the currency.
And it's the lies.
It's the lies that support the lies that support the get rich quick scheme is the scam. If I try to sell you the Brooklyn Bridge, it doesn't mean that the Brooklyn Bridge isn't real just because I don't own it. But I could say I own it and I'm going to sell it to you. Now you can look at the bridge and say, well, it's real. Yeah, of course it's real. Okay, but the bridge itself is not the scam. It's the lie that I'm going to sell it to you. That's the scam. And so that's what the dinar is. It's a huge, huge marketing scam. So, and that will conclude this episode of Iraq Currency Watch. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Please post your comments and post anything you want to post about what we've discussed here. Anxious to hear from you, anxious to hear what you have to say. And I'm anxious to hear anybody that wants to take on these arguments and refute them because...
bring it on.
Bring it on. We're waiting for you, and we don't censor anybody. And, even if we don't agree with you, we might agree to disagree. But we say bring it on. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to Iraq Currency Watch podcast. And we're going to see you, we're going to hear you probably in the next. See ya.
Hasta luego.